Gunung Padang is a man-made pyramid. And it's been found about 3 hours drive west of Bandung on the island of Java. And for a long time it was thought to be a relatively young megalithic site. There is a megalithic site on top of what was thought to be a natural hill.
Until a few years ago, the ancient structures considered the height of early human achievement included dolmen remains and the well-known Egyptian pyramids, which were believed to date back around 5,000 to 7,000 years before the Common Era. But the discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey changed everything. This find pushed back the timeline of advanced civilizations and construction techniques to nearly 10,000 years before Christ. It took about 20 years for Göbekli Tepe to be fully accepted by mainstream historians, showing how reluctant the field can be to challenge long-held ideas. Still, once it gained attention, the site earned its place in our understanding of ancient history. Now, another structure has entered the conversation. A recently uncovered site in Indonesia, known as Gunung Padang, could push the timeline of civilization back by another 15,000 years if it gains full recognition. A group of scientists has taken the lead in bringing this discovery to light. However, the historical community has already shown signs of pushing back and minimizing its importance. What's happening around Gunung Padang shows the ongoing struggle between new discoveries and the traditional version of history. Graham Hancock has spoken a lot about Gunung Padang. He believes it could be the remains of a lost civilization. He points to the work of Dr. Danny Hillman Natawijaja, a geologist who has been studying the site since 2010 using advanced tools like ground-penetrating radar. These studies have revealed multiple layers of construction under the surface, with some of the structures dating back over 20,000 years, which challenges the current timeline of human history. The name Gunung Padang translates to Mountain of Light, or Mountain of Enlightenment in the local Sundanese language. Hancock believes that the site's name and the respect local people have for it might be linked to ancient traditions and its deep historical significance. Now let's dive into further details of this discovery. History is full of people whose discoveries were either not fully understood at the time or were ignored by powerful groups. Nikola Tesla's work on electricity and Rosalind Franklin's role in uncovering the structure of DNA are two such examples. Franklin's findings were overlooked partly because she was a woman, and while Watson and Crick received the Nobel Prize for the discovery, she received no recognition. The field of archaeology has seen the same pattern. Göbekli Tepe was first found by Istanbul University, but its significance was dismissed and research eventually stopped. It wasn't until Klaus Schmidt and his team at Heidelberg University returned to the site that it got the attention it deserved, 30 years later. A similar situation unfolded in the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia, in 1914. During colonial times in Java, Dutch settlers explored the area and came across stories passed down by locals. One of these tales spoke of a figure called Kandi, either a hero or a god, who supposedly built a sacred city on terraces overnight to shield people from an incoming disaster. This story caught the interest of Dutch historian Nicholas Johannes Kroom. He went to investigate and found a heavily forested hill. In his writings, he described 4 massive terraces at the top of the mountain, with vertical sections made from andesite stone that looked like grave markers. Kroom submitted a report to the Imperial Antiquities Directorate, asking for a team and resources to explore further. But the Dutch Empire, facing internal issues, never acted on his request. Indonesia eventually gained independence in 1949, and both the letter and the site faded from public memory. But that wasn't the end of the story. 3 local teenagers came across the large stepped hill after hearing rumors about it. They quickly informed the authorities, which led the Indonesian Archaeological Research Office to send out teams and begin excavations. What started as a random discovery could potentially change everything we know about early human civilization. One of the first things researchers noticed was the presence of massive stone blocks across the area. These blocks measured between 3 to 5 meters in length and weighed from 250 kilograms to a ton. These stones were not manually carved by humans. They are natural volcanic formations. Their shape comes from a geological process also seen in places like the Giant's Causeway in Ireland and the Devil's Postpile in California. However, the number of these columns, about 50,000, is not something you would expect to occur on its own. The nearest volcanic source is Mount Pangrango, located 50 kilometers from the site. These stone columns formed when volcanic lava cooled and solidified. The hill rises 90 meters above the surrounding ground, and the stones appear to be cut to certain dimensions. This suggests that they were moved from nearby locations to build up the hill's top structure. This raises a major question. Who moved all of these stones, and for what purpose? As the excavation continued, archaeologists noticed that the stones were not placed randomly. Instead, they were deliberately arranged into regular patterns and retaining walls which separated the hilltop into different zones. Whoever brought these stones had once constructed a massive structure made up of 5 terraces, linked together by 370 steps, spanning 2,700 square meters. However, an early misjudgment occurred. Just like the initial interpretation of Göbekli Tepe, researchers at first concluded that the site was simply a ruin from 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. For some reason, they considered it unimportant in terms of historical value. The exact date when the Indonesian Archaeological Office found the site is unclear, but a major shift happened in 2012. That year, researchers discovered that the 2,500-year-old section was only the surface layer. Once they started digging deeper, everything changed. 2 leading geologists, Danny Hillman and Ali Ikar, took charge of the excavation. Using modern tools, they worked their way through the site, layer by layer. At a depth of 4 meters, Ali Ikar revealed that they had uncovered a cultural layer beneath the hill. Radiocarbon dating placed this layer around 5,200 BC. As the team applied even more advanced methods, such as ground-penetrating radar, seismic scans, and core sampling, they uncovered 3 different layers, each containing man-made items and pointing to older and older time periods. The second layer, located 4 meters deep, was dated to between 7,500 and 8,000 years ago. The third layer, found at a depth of 15 meters, went back nearly 28,000 years. That level of age challenges the entire timeline of early human development. If we take the 4-meter layer and estimate the site is 7,500 years old, it still predates the Sumerians by almost 3,000 years. But a site that's 28,000 years old would take us into a period long before the Ice Age, when no complex civilization was thought to exist. With that in mind, the team expanded their study and found that 3 large structures were built into the hill, layered on top of one another, each going deeper and older. This changed the entire understanding of the site. It wasn't just a hill with an old structure on top, it was a massive terraced pyramid, built in layers over thousands of years and covering about 15 hectares. As Danny Hillman described it, they were looking at a human-made structure that became more advanced the deeper they explored. It could be compared to Egypt's pyramids or the massive megaliths found in parts of Europe. According to him, it was all built by a long-lost civilization. The Indonesian government, after reviewing this significant archaeological data, begins funding deeper research into the region. Even the Indonesian military steps in to help organize and secure the area. At the time, Prime Minister Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono calls it an important find for the history of humanity. But for Danny Hillman and Ali Ekar, things are about to take a difficult turn. To their surprise, they face resistance, not from outsiders, but from their own peers. Looking back, Danny Hillman would later say, "These discoveries, which had the potential to shift our understanding of history, ended up being the last thing my fellow archaeologists wanted." What they feared most was the discovery gaining attention and receiving major funding and personnel for the Padang site. Funding for the Padang excavation quickly becomes limited. In fact, some researchers have been given money for years without making any meaningful progress. On top of that, political lobbying starts to affect the project. Some archaeologists who oppose the research use their influence to try and bring all work at the site to a standstill. Established academics with long-held views and a strong interest in maintaining their position resist any new interpretations. Their main demand is simple: stop the research entirely. They argue that nothing older than 5,000 years could logically exist in this region. Mainstream historians believe that advanced structures only started appearing with civilizations like the Sumerians. According to them, the idea of complex societies existing before that is unreasonable. They claim the researchers are chasing unproven ideas and wasting funds on something without real evidence. Facing this backlash, Danny Hillman admits in an interview, "I knew I was putting myself in a tough position by presenting these findings. Although our research is based on solid science, the real fight was against a much deeper resistance. This challenge is not just about the data itself, but about pushing against traditional beliefs in academic circles. As excavations continue and the thick forest around the area is cleared, researchers uncover something unexpected in the second cultural layer at a depth of 4 meters. They discover an object that looks like a coin, dating back to 5,200 years before Christ. There's still debate among archaeologists about whether it's actually a coin or just a decorative piece. What matters is that, if it truly is a coin, it would predate the earliest known coins minted by the Lydians in the 7th century BC. More digging and the discovery of similar items would be needed to confirm this. Another interesting find in the same layer is a terrace wall with a pyramid-like design. While examining the structure, archaeologists come across a type of ancient mortar between the stones. The composition of the mortar stands out: 14% clay, 45% silica, and 45% iron. This raises questions, since the Iron Age did not begin until around 1200 BC. Before that, some early forms of this technology were used in places like Kamankyohoyuk around 2000 BC. Still, the region contains a lot of volcanic material, so the iron in the mix might not mean the mortar was man-made. Volcanic activity could have influenced the composition, adding another layer of complexity to the analysis. Gunung Padang means Enlightenment Hill. The name reflects the spiritual importance of the area, with legends describing it as a sacred space used for enlightenment ceremonies and rituals throughout history. It's still unclear when and how these rituals began, or how long they continued. The modern world didn't become aware of this structure until 1979, although it had already been discovered in 1914 by a Dutch explorer. Since then, the Indonesian government has taken a renewed interest in the site. It's possible that people familiar with the area had kept the rituals alive in secret, or passed them down across generations. The Dutch explorer believed it was a large cemetery, but no human remains have been found. Instead, evidence of a collapsed structure with no bones suggests that the place was more likely a temple or ceremonial site than a burial ground. Local priests in the region believe the stones at the site hold special properties connected to spiritual growth and meditation. While this might sound uncertain, some scientific studies have shown that the stones emit strong electromagnetic signals, supporting these local beliefs. This detail is worth noting. It might be due to the volcanic nature of the region, but what stands out most is that some of these stones produce musical tones when interacted with. Studies have shown that when specific stones are struck using the 4 main frequencies found in Western music, they produce unusual sounds. Given how deeply ancient civilizations were connected to sound, this detail shouldn't be brushed off. It's genuinely interesting. Also, in nearly every video on this channel, including this one, I provide links to the sources, books, and documents mentioned. If you're interested, make sure to check the description. During the Indonesian elections, a shift in leadership takes place. Joko Widodo replaces Kio Bambang Yudhoyono as the new president. For mainstream archaeology, this change marks a turning point. Soon after taking office, one of Widodo's first moves is to shut down all research at Gunung Padang. He remains in power today, and the work at Gunung Padang has stayed inactive since then, left completely untouched. But something unexpected happens in the region. Amid all the strange discoveries, a major development occurs. Indonesia holds another election, bringing in a new president named Jah to replace Widodo. One of his first decisions is to completely stop the ongoing investigations at Gunung Padang. The site is still closed to this day, forgotten and neglected. So what triggered the sudden attention this ancient pyramid is receiving again? This question matters because it reveals how historical knowledge can be hidden or blocked. On November 20th, 2023, Danny Hillman publishes an article presenting all the collected data from Gunung Padang in an academic journal. The article goes viral across social media and science platforms, reigniting public interest and scientific debate. Everything discussed in the article is a summary of technical information gathered by Hillman himself, who led the archaeological efforts at the site. What surprised everyone is that a journal like Nature chose to publish it. The archaeological world was caught off guard. In fact, an investigation was launched targeting Nature and those involved in publishing the piece. This reaction highlights what often happens when scientific findings challenge widely accepted views. Researchers start attacking each other. You're watching this happen in real time. One critic, Fintan O'Wyle from Cardiff University, disputes the article's claim that the stones formed a structured retaining wall. His counter-argument is that natural forces could have rolled the stones into that shape. I'll explain what he means with a different example in a moment. Another archaeologist, Bill Farrell from the University of New Haven, has also spoken against the article. He argues that since no human remains or coal traces have been found, things typically left by ancient humans, it's unlikely that humans built the site. He insists that during that era, people were only hunter-gatherers, and even they would have left behind signs like fire pits or graves. It's frustrating to watch, but the real issue here is how inflexible science can be at times. And the person who wrote the article isn't just some newcomer. He's a well-known figure with decades of experience in archaeology. He officially published his article and suggested, let's resume the paused work and reevaluate things together. But instead of doing that, now there's an investigation targeting the institutions that shared and published the article. Seriously, when did science become so rigid? The author made valid arguments. Rather than saying, let's assess his claims using our own approach, visit the site, carry out our responsibilities, and work together on the excavation to expand our understanding of human history, they decided to launch investigations. We've reached a point where someone is trying to dismiss the article by claiming the stones rolled on their own and formed a retaining wall. Is this where we're at now? What happened to genuine scientific curiosity? What happened to the drive to explore beyond the current boundaries? This isn't about confirming whether the claims are true or false. It might only be a 3,000-year-old artifact. Even so, it deserves investigation, So why are people, who claim to be fellow seekers of knowledge, so quick to attack one another? Think carefully about this. Ask yourself why there's such intense effort to defend the false version of history imposed by the West. Try to understand it on your own terms. If you open the map and trace from the Gulf of Thailand to Indonesia and then toward Papua New Guinea, you'll see that the region appears scattered, as though it's made up of fragments. What you're actually looking at is the remains of a continent that broke apart and submerged thousands of years ago. Roughly 20,000 years back, during the last ice age, global sea levels were about 150 to 200 meters lower than what we see today. And in that area, there was a landmass covering close to 2 million square kilometers. Back then, Java Island, where Gunung Padang is located, wasn't an island. It was at the southern edge of that landmass. While ice covered the poles, this equatorial zone supported a rich variety of life. The story goes that a deity, angered by the world's corruption, sent a massive flood to cleanse it. As the flood submerged entire continents, 2 survivors climbed the tallest mountain. The destruction was so great that even the peak was nearly lost. The deity halted the flood just in time to spare them. After this, the remaining parts of land that held surviving life rose, becoming the islands we now know as Indonesia. The final 2 survivors passed on, and humanity began to repopulate. This is the same story we hear all over the globe, isn't it? No matter where you go, it shows up in different forms. That's because it isn't just a story. It's a memory, and one filled with trauma. It's a memory too powerful to be forgotten. That's why, across all cultures, it has been passed down through generations. You can still see the signs of this destruction just by studying a map. Around 12,000 to 13,000 years ago, during what is referred to as the early Younger Dryas, or the Deluge, the massive landmass was left submerged beneath the sea, waiting to be rediscovered. The scale of this disaster makes you wonder whether many of the so-called myths are actually based on real events, distant echoes of a forgotten civilization. Maybe there's something real behind the stories told by the Javanese people about Gunung Padang. They described how it was transformed into a terraced pyramid, with underground chambers meant to protect people from some approaching threat. In the legend of the heroic god Sang Hyang Mir, the pyramid's construction served as a shelter from a looming catastrophe. That explanation seems more logical. Only time will tell what's true and what isn't. In the past, the story of the Great Flood was seen as little more than a religious tale. But today, we're finding signs of it all across the world. The stories we once dismissed as bedtime tales about lost continents are now backed by real discoveries. So what are your thoughts on this mystery? Tell us in the comments below and subscribe to our channel for more content.